Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back to the second part of this panel, which is, of course, again, the refugee crisis, the topic that we live and work for at the moment here in Brussels. This time, though, with a different aspect of it, the implications for economies and societies. I'll introduce our panel in a second, but I would ask you to get out your cell phones one more time and the apps, because we would like to do something before we start the panel, which is go on word cloud and type one word, just one word. It has to be together. What you think is the biggest concern for impediment to integration, meaning what's the biggest obstacle to integration of refugees in the European Union? One word. It could be anything. It could be religious, it could be education, whatever. Word cloud, right. And while you do that, I would like to introduce our panel. Thank you very much for making it here. Today we have Irena Krasnicka here. She's a special envoy for migration at the Foreign Ministry for Foreign Affairs in the Czech Republic. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks.
Then on my left, Jean-Marie Guehenno, who is a very experienced French diplomat, but now he is the president of the International Crisis Group, so he knows what's going on in the people that are trying to make their way here to the EU. Thank you very much for coming as well. Mr. Ivan Krastev is here as well. Krastev, sorry, chairman for the Center for Liberal Studies, which is in Sofia, Bulgaria. So we have our, I can't say Eastern Bloc, but we have two people from those countries we've been talking about a lot lately for different reasons in the refugee crisis. Thank you very much for being here as well. And from Stuttgart, Baden-Württemberg, we have from Daimler-Benz, of course, the man who works at the Human Resources Department, the Director of Human Resources, Mr. Wilfried Porth. Very interesting company in this respect, of course. We'll talk about it later, but thank you very much for coming as well. So I think we are ready for the word cloud. This is the result. Very good. Okay, you can see it. Xenophobia, fear, identity, culture, inclusion, economy. Those are the big ones. Okay. At a different point with different people doing the same thing, we had things also like Islam in there, for example, things we will talk about, the religious implications and everything, but I think this is a very good basis to talk about it later on. But I would like to start with you, Mr. Porth, because your boss said when the refugee crisis started, these are the people, referring to the Syrian refugees, these are exactly the people that we need. And you started a program for internships for refugees. How's that going?
Yeah, the first group of 40 people has passed this program, and basically all of them have found a job. Some of them as apprentices in our own company, and most of the others in agencies for time working. So we started very well, and we are now launching the next phase. So we will hire another 300 for this program, and we are very, very positive on that we can, take our responsibility and help those people to integrate not only professionally but also socially.
Did the things happen you expected? Were those the people you expected them to be?
I think there's a wide expectation on those people, but the most part of it is they are very energetic, they are very willing to learn, they are really very enthusiastic about having this opportunity, and they have a very special history, very personal history of how they arrived in Germany. So there are a lot of young people with traumatic experiences, so they are very different starting point, but all of them are really very energetic and very motivated to do something very positive with their lives, and that's the best you can have as a motivation.
Mr. Krastev, you once said it's now in the refugee crisis only about which country becomes the parking lot for refugees. It appears that would be Greece, right?
For the moment.
No, but listen, when you go to the refugee crisis, because I do believe that from time to time we try with one or two words to explain things that are slightly more complicated. Fear is fine, but the story is that for many Europeans, what has happened as a result, first the Euro crisis and then Ukraine, and now the refugee crisis, is that we start to see differently the world in which we are living. Before, globalization was perceived and interdependence as something which is positive, and people have been very much now. Now you have two phases of globalization. The good one is a tourist. Everybody likes tourists. By the way, some of these refugees used to be tourists 5 years ago, and we all like them. And then you have the refugees. And this type of a story, by the way, in Greece now what they're doing mainly is not to allow the tourists and the refugees to meet. You're basically trying to divide between the tourist islands and the refugee islands. And I do believe that this major change and fear of the world in which we are living, we are not understanding very much, is behind this, because in many of our countries, you have a very strong anti-refugee sentiments in the absence of refugees. For example, in Slovakia, for the 2015, there were 169 refugees that entered the country. At the same time, you have the feeling that this is the most important issue which is shaping the political agenda. And I do believe we should talk this. There are figures which are not there, but what are important. For example, demographic fears. Listen, Bulgaria is an aging society. According to the UN projections, in the next 30 years, we're going to lose 27% of our population. It's small countries. And you start to have the fear that in 100 years, nobody is going to speak your language, that you are disappearing. For example, in Eastern Europe, the failure to integrate Roma, major part of the fear that we have with the refugees. The idea is if you cannot integrate your own. And my last point is the story with the refugees is that what was the strength of the European Union before, that we are liberal democracies and that we are welfare states, makes it us much more difficult to react when it comes to the refugees.
What it seems like in your country, they fail to see, or are there people like the people from Daimler-Benz who say, these are the people we need, bring them on? Do you have that? It seems that there is a big difference there.
There is a big difference. By the way, major difference between East and West is not so much on what the governments are doing, but also how the public debate is going. To be honest, Western Europe is divided when it comes to the refugees. You have a very strong pro-refugee camp, you have an anti-refugee camp. In Central and Eastern Europe, we're quite united, over-united on this. But first of all, there is a problem with unemployment in our part of the world. You have a huge problem integrating in the labor markets the people younger than 30, 35. And when you have a situation like this, the idea of you need them theoretically. You know that in 5, 10, 15 years, you're going to need them. But this is on the level of the managers of the big company. The workers who is working basically think about his immediate environment. And I do believe this is important. There is one good news which comes from Central and Eastern Europe, and this is very political. Many people and many political leaders believe that if they're going to use a very strong anti-refugee rhetoric, this is going to work. And I do believe that last elections in Slovakia shows that when the governments decided to overperform on anti-refugees rhetoric, who benefits is an anti-system party. I do believe this is the most positive thing that happens, because the difference between the refugee crisis and some of the other crises is that it is very much touching the very political structures of our societies, for whom you are voting, basically redistribution of fear, redistribution of blame.
Ms. Krasnicka, you're from the same neck of the woods, but part of the Visegrad states, obviously Czech Republic, a lot in the media because of that lately. I would like to know, what's your job as the special envoy for migration? Is it blocking migration? Is it making sure that people are integrated?
Well, no, okay, that is not my job to integrate people and so on, of course. It is a job of the Ministry of Interior and Education and Social Affairs and so on and so on. Well, I see it and we see it a little more from the point of view of foreign policy and a little more global point of view. And this is also something what we try to bring into the debate, internal debate. But I don't want to speak very much about the Czech Republic only, because I would like to see all the problem more in global perspective. I would probably follow what was said by the Commissioner before, and that is that first of all, we should be a little more calm, and maybe the lessons learned from Slovakia might help also. I think that, in fact, Europe is not deeply divided. Of course, I mean, there are differences in tactics, but there are not so many differences in strategy, how to deal with migration, both regular and irregular migration, how to deal with this actual crisis. Yes, maybe some accents, but after all, I must say, the heads of state agreed upon a list of measures.
There's a major difference when it comes to who's going to take in the refugees. The redistribution mechanism.
The redistribution of refugees is one. I know that it sounds very important, but it is only one part and not as important. The discussion was not even about resettlement. There was not the trouble with resettlement, only with the relocation procedures and with their obligatory character. So even the countries like of Visegrad countries, our country, now I can speak for our country, we at the first round we gave higher number than proposed on non-obligatory, because we were a bit afraid how this mechanism would work. That was our, we said, okay, how shall we force the people to come to the country they don't want to? And I must tell you, it's not only because they would know very well that Czech Republic or Bulgaria is less well off than some other country. No, they didn't want to go to Luxembourg, because they never heard about Luxembourg. They didn't want to go to Luxembourg during relocation procedures. So this was there were relevant sorrows that we would have to force people. How would we do it, and so on and so on. So we were a bit afraid of this. So we are not deeply divided, but of course it might become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Mr. Guehenno, when you deal, as you do as president of the International Crisis Group, with the places where these people come from, Syria mainly in this case, is the discussion in Europe, does it seem off topic? Because what's going on in the people's minds who flee from these places, can they be stopped? Can they be channeled when you come from a region like that?
Well, I don't think that Europe can be an island of peace and prosperity in an ocean of turmoil. It will not work. You see that in the world, more than 50% of refugees, they come from only 3 countries. They come from Syria, they come from Afghanistan, they come from Somalia. That should be manageable if the Europeans were really focused on addressing those conflicts. It's not the whole world, it's those 3 countries. And it's a hard decision to leave a country. I mean, all the Syrians we talk to, they would, it's the greatest distress to have to abandon one's place. They go to Turkey with the hope that it's going to end soon, to be close to their place. And when they begin to see it looks hopeless, then they go further away. They come to Europe. So it's clear, it's obvious that the real solution is really in addressing the Syrian situation and bringing peace to Syria. So long as you don't do that, you're not going to stem the flow of refugees with any deal. And I would want to go one step further, because there is a question of refugees and there is a question of migrants. And of course, legally, they are very different. But Europe has to get used to the idea that the issue of migration is here to stay. We know the figures for refugees, 60 million refugees and IDPs, 60 million or so. Migrants, 170 million around the world. It's a huge problem. It's a problem that's going to continue to be with us. When you think that in Africa, for instance, well, the working population in Africa represents at the moment roughly less than 13% of the working age population of the world. In 2100, it will represent 41% of the working population of the world. The pressure, the migration pressure, is going to be with us
So what has to change in the minds of people in Europe? We're not talking about compassion here. We're talking about economic chances. What are we talking about?
We're talking about, yes, economic opportunities, a continent that creates jobs. We are also talking about mindset. I happen to live between Europe and the United States. And I can see that in the US, as its issues with migration, we have seen what Mr. Trump is saying about migrants. But nevertheless, it's part of the American psyche that it's a project for the future, that America is a new beginning for, I mean, it's partly a myth, but it's a very positive myth. Europe is much more dependent on memories, national memories, or the memory of the wars that we fought with each other. And so the balance between that contract for the future and memory is much harder. I mean, we have to recognize it in Europe. And that's what the panelists were saying. I mean, there's a fear of losing one's own past. And Europe has to reconcile its past with a vision of the future where it helped shape the world for centuries. Now it's going to be to continue to be integrated with the world, but in a dialogue with the world. It will also be shaped by other culture. And it's a source of enrichment, not just economic enrichment. But for that message to come across, if you think you can fight populism with populism light, so to speak, it doesn't work. And that's what Ivan was saying about the Slovak elections. You have to convince the Europeans that in reality, and I mean, living more of my time in America than in Europe, I see it as something obvious. You have to convince them that the rest of the world is an opportunity for Europe. It's not a threat.
We always talk about convincing the Europeans and everything. It's a very diverse place, obviously, with, as I can tell you, 28 different media systems. And but you have the chance to tell a little bit about your experience because it's sort of a smaller environment. And Swabians aren't particularly known to be the greatest optimists in the world. Nevertheless, was it hard to convince
the greatest engineers?
Build good cars. Was it hard to convince your employees? Did you have a lot of concern coming out saying, listen, these people, they don't speak our language, they don't know what we're doing here, this is not going to work?
Actually, most of our employees in Germany don't speak Swabian. And when you go to Sindelfingen, I think we have more than 100 different nations working in this place. And especially the automotive industry has a huge history when it comes to immigrants. Yeah, so we have Turkish people, Greece. We have people from all around Europe.
Which still highly specialized what you do down, for example, in Sindelfingen.
Yeah, but when they came in the 50s and 60s, actually, they have not had those qualifications we are having today. The
production has completely changed, you would agree, right?
Yes.
More computers, more specializing, more education required, correct?
Yeah, but still, when you go to the assembly, we still have also, I would say, basic work. So the reaction from our employees was just the other way you would expect. They have been very receptive. They donated money. They offered their support in mentoring. We had really a very positive feedback from our people to say, yes, we want to help. So what can we do to help as a company? What can we do to help as the society? We have a lot of initiatives all around the cities and villages around Stuttgart. So there is a very positive reaction from our employees.
Mr. Krastev, do you think this could be an example also for other countries in Europe? Say, look, this is working well, look at Germany, or is that fading? It seems almost like it had the adverse effect.
Well, listen, I do believe that you has the first shock, which is psychological. Something is happening in the world that you didn't expect. And then people start to adjust. And I do believe this is the chance. And of course, listen, all over the world, they're nice people. And even some of these very strongly speaking anti-refugee societies, when they see a concrete person with a concrete problem, they're going to help him. They're not going basically to throw him on the street. The problem is that also because of a very high level of mistrust to the political elites. A huge part of our population have the fear that they're not heard. You have a new phenomenon in European politics, which I'm going to call the threatened majorities. By the way, you have it in the United States too. You see with the white working class in the States. Basically, these people fear that the world is going to be reshaped by this coalition between cosmopolitan elites and all these refugees, and there is no place for them. So from this point of view, for me, the real discussion about refugees is not the discussion between European Union and Turkey. This is what is going to happen politically in our own societies. It's not what we're talking on television. It's going to be very much how people vote, how basically they start to adjust, how we are basically going to do with the labor market. And here there is a real choice to be made. In order to integrate these people in a big way, our welfare system is not what helps. Why Turkey so easily integrates? Exactly because of the fact that their labor market is much more flexible. But this type of a welfare state was part of the identity for some of the European Union
countries. Don't you think also the fact that Syrian refugees are more easily integrated into Turkey is a cultural question, a religious question?
For sure. And we should be very clear on this. In 1920s, Bulgaria, which was then much poorer than now, managed to deal with a refugee flow which was around 15% of the population. This was after the results of the Balkan Wars and the World War I. The problem was that this was basically mostly ethnic Bulgarians who speak the same language, and all of the country has this type of experience. The problem is also how you're integrating in a society which do not have a colonial experience in a way. For example, French. They have been traveling to the world, they know people coming. This was kind of a difficult experience, but the foreigner is not the real foreigners. And then you have these much more smaller societies in Central and Eastern Europe. And we said, listen, but we have been not going anywhere. Bulgaria failed to make an empire, unfortunately. So why they're coming, what we can do with them. And based on the history and so on, of course, Islam plays differently, different parts. But it's not going to be about re-educating people. It's going to be very much how the political process will go. And if it goes right, then basically also the business is going to show that some of these people, by the way, are going to be integrated much better than we expect. Because there are certain groups that have been integrated so well in Germany, like the Iranians, that nobody even discusses it. And it's also a class issue, to be honest. It depends how basically rich these people are, how well educated they are. It's not only ethnicity and culture that matters.
Ms. Krasnicka, you've been writing all the time, I saw.
No, not at all, not at all.
You want to react?
I would like to react on this, what you said, and also here about migration, because we sometimes mix things. And migration is here with us, has been here with us all the time. And with globalization and development of the new technologies, plus end of Cold War, we could have presumed that it will grow up, and it did. And we have to understand that forced migration, which is horrible, and 90% is outside Europe, is only a tiny part of migration as such. And people do migrate into Europe and within Europe, and these are big numbers, and we got used to it. We were not used to that, but we got used to it. We got used to 4% of foreigners living in our country. In 15 years, it's from nearly zero. And I remember when the Ukrainians started to come for work mostly, people were a bit, now everybody is happy because they know it. So the people need a little time.
So they need more migration to see what it's all about.
Yes, to some extent it's true. We need more Europe. We need more migration to solve the crisis, and people have good heart, and so I have noticed it. I think that it will work, but we have the regularized migration. That what gives us fear, and what is not good for the future integration of all people who come, despite of their status, is the fact that they come irregularly, they feed the organized crime, so it's not a problem that they come, but how they come. And that is what we should solve. And there, I think that we are all on one boat, all Europeans. We believe that we should regularize migration.
By the way, we're ready to open up the floor whenever you are, so if you have a question, just indicate it, but you wanted to react.
Yeah, I wanted to react to that because I think it's a very important point. We have looked at Central America, and you see how illegal immigration into the United States then becomes a business for criminal networks, and it's self-sustaining because there's a great interest of those criminal networks to keep the illegal immigration going. So it's very important for the Europeans to have legal ways, and not legal ways which are a trickle, but legal ways that are commensurate with the size of the challenge for people to get into Europe. Otherwise, you criminalize the whole movement of people, and that is not good for peace, that is not good for stability, it can get connected to terrorism, everything is wrong with it. But for that to happen, you need to go beyond the tiny numbers, because then the queue of entering Europe through legal means is so long that it's not a real option.
We have a question in the back. No, it's you. Go ahead, Mr. James.
Jack James from Johns Hopkins in Washington. Mr. Guehenno, I wanted to ask your advice on something. You said that the Americans have a myth, but it's a myth about the way that hundreds of millions of people came to this country and integrated themselves. One of the reasons that we were able to do that is because we had jobs. That's not an issue at the moment. It is more a cultural question at the moment. I think our myth is breaking down. But I wondered, how do you create a myth in Europe that took us decades, if not centuries, to create, that informs the way that we deal with our current debate in the United States about immigration? And how do you create that in Europe at a time when it's a very different set of circumstances? We can't transfer the American experience back to Europe, that's for sure. But how do you create that narrative that allows this process to go along? And by the way, one other question. Do you think that it would help in any way, shape, or form if the United States was capable of taking in more of these refugees?
Well, on your last question, I think the refugee problem is a global one, and I think it would be good for the United States to take some refugees, just as it is good for Europe to take some refugees. On your first question, I think it has to do with what Ivan was saying on the break between elites and the people. And the challenge is that this is an issue where there has to be a collective European message, but the solutions are very local. As was said by other panelists, I mean, when it's human being to human being, then the decency of human nature can come back. And that's where it gets very complicated, because if you have a city, if you have a business like Daimler that takes that responds to it, then it becomes manageable, and they can gradually build that new identity. I don't think it can be built just top down. It can be helped if politicians, instead of following going with populism, have a different language. But because of that distance that exists now between elites and the people, it has to be also, I think, very local.
Go ahead.
Very good.
It's a very political platform here, but we are dealing with reality every single day. And with the basics. And I tell you, politicians could really help in taking bureaucracy away. Yeah, I have heard you have said how many ministries are involved in every country in making things happen. At the end, it's about social and professional, not integrity, but sorry. Integration. Thank you.
The reality in Baden-Württemberg, for example.
And the reality is, we have still legal regulations which prevent us to give people enough language courses. Yeah, it's not about the funding. We have enough funding, but then the one locations we don't want to have it because we have our own things. We are not able to register all those people correctly. Yeah, we still have rules where in the first 15 months they are not allowed to work, even if we provide them workplaces or apprenticeships and so on. So there are so many basic things which could be done in order to speed up the integration, because we will not be able to integrate those people if we build more refugee homes and whatsoever. We need to integrate those people in our neighborhoods, and not in groups of hundreds and 200s and 300s, in groups of families. Like we want to be integrated when we move somewhere.
But the reality in Baden-Württemberg, especially now after the election, is also that it seems the people are very confused. At the one hand, alternative for Germany, so the right-wing populist movement got strong.
About some of our
and at the other hand, you have the Green president, minister-president, prime minister, who supports Angela Merkel's policy and wins the election. What's your reading of all that?
That's a specialty in Baden-Württemberg. Yeah. Now, let me say, when we don't take the eastern part in Sachsen, but the issue is more than 80% of all people who went for the election have still voted for solid democratic parties. So it's about a little bit green or red or black or whatsoever, but at the end of the day, there has been a voting for democratic parties. The issue remains the same. Yeah, we need to simplify the rules. You know, we need qualified labor, yeah? So we want to allow those young people to go for apprenticeships. Now, in order to enter those apprenticeships, they need to learn perfect German, because otherwise they cannot pass the exams. Yeah, do you need to speak perfectly German, which no Swabian really does? Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
I speak for myself, yes. When you want to become a plumber, or when you become a butcher or whatsoever. So the issue is we have some kind of rules in place which prevent people to be integrated fast. And those rules we need to break down, and then I'm very sure we will be much more successful and much faster.
Cut the red tape.
Yeah. But it's also very important, because this is what you mean by integration, because labor market is going to integrate you to a certain level, and this is how it works. But we expect these people to become like us. And I do believe, for me, the biggest problem, it's not refugees anymore, it's about migration, is probably we should realize that this is the form of the revolution for the 21st century. Let's give you one date. In 1981, when the first World Values Survey had been done by the Michigan University, it appeared that Nigerians were as happy as West Germans. There was no positive economic correlations between economic well-being and happiness. 20 years later, Nigerians were as happy as their GDP is going to predict. What was happened, meanwhile, is that Nigerians got television sets. So they see how the West Germans are living. So these days, if you want to change your life, it makes much more sense to change your country than to change your government. It's easier. It's not a collective action.
Can I take that message back home?
Yeah. No, but this is very important. And I'm saying, as a result of it, you're going to have this type of a process which is not refugee connected, it's not about this and that, which very difficult can be regulated. And in Europe, in a certain way, we are not ready for this. And we are not ready for this because our very idea of society is very different. To believe that this is going to change over 3 years and to explain everything in xenophobia and others is wrong. The biggest problem is not what to tell people what is happening in our country. The biggest is to try to push people to be interested in what is happening in the world. And this is not easy, because normally we're not very much interested in what is happening in the world. This is it. And I do believe this is a huge problem, because everything that worked for Europe till yesterday as an integration is becoming a problem. We're becoming much more the victim of certain of our successes than of our failures, and this is why it's so difficult is to do it, because how to depart with your successes. By the way, on foreign policy issues, this also has consequences. For 20 years, European Union was talking how we are transforming our neighborhood. Now our neighborhood starts to transform us. Look, our relations with Turkey, our relations with Russia. Do we even have a language to talk about this?
We have a question up there. Please, gentleman with red tie.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Rajai Barakat. I am a former migrant, and thanks to Belgium, now I am a good European citizen, as you see. I am really happy to hear what I heard today. For these migrants or refugees, I think that there is no illegal migrants now who is coming from Syria. Why? Because we know from where they arrive, they don't have visas, but they know that they arrive because of war, and we know where to receive them. I think they become legal from the moment they arrive to Europe, to the European Union countries. And we have to stop to speak about these migrants as illegal. Those who are illegal are those who arrive here to Belgium, and you go to Chaussée du Mons, not far from here, and you can have hundreds of them who entered, and we don't know from where they become.
What's your question?
My question is that, don't you think that many people from Syria, I met a lot of them who are medicines, who are businessmen, who have many, who have farms and factories. Many of them are going to turn back to Syria. We have to speak more to our people here in Europe about these facts. When you go to Dubai, do you think that you as a European businessman, are you integrated in Dubai? You are not integrated in Dubai. You don't see any Dubai citizens there. And you go for business, and many hundreds of thousands of Europeans and Americans are working in Arab countries and in the third world countries, and we have to speak to people about that.
If I may, let me try to phrase that question. Do you think, and that's for you, Ms. Krasnicka, that people are aware, and I'm picking up what you said, that most of these people are planning to go back to their home countries once they can?
Well, first of all, I would like to just clarify what I meant by regularization of migration. I have never said a word illegal migrant. I would never use it because illegal migrant does not exist. You know, it's irregular. They can come in irregular way. There are illegal ways, but not the migrants themselves. I mean, once they come and say asylum, or, you know, then it is perfectly regular. So when I speak about regularization, I say that the people should come either with papers or as refugees, but nothing in between. Not without papers which they throw into the sea. This makes no sense. So that is, and we should know who comes, and that would help also the migrants. That would lower down their vulnerability, and that would help. That's what the measures are being done for regularization, and also for what we said, they can come from their countries, they can come from third countries immediately, legally, and so on.
But if I understand you correctly, you're saying we don't even need full integration here because people want to go home at some point, correct?
So, well, many of them are going to turn back. You know,
yes,
I know many Syrians who are here, and they were in Aleppo, and they were businessmen. They have factories, and they say we are waiting the moment that when war stops in Syria, we are going to turn back. And the problem is here in Europe is that nobody is speaking about stopping war in Syria. We all as Europeans have the moral responsibility on what had happened in Syria and Iraq and Afghanistan and all these Arab countries. And our values as Europeans now, I think we don't have to speak anymore about values, because we make Arab Spring in Arab countries so as to have democracy. It failed. We are now in the streets in cold, and nobody. And as I said to my friend here, we became a marchandise. We want to take us from here.
I think we get that point, and I think we should play it over to Mr. Guehenno.
Human rights. Thank you very much.
Because he's exactly the right man to react to that.
But I do think that Europe, not just Europe, but the United States, the international community, did not take the Syrian tragedy seriously until it hit Europe, and that was morally wrong and strategically wrong. And of course, now after hundreds of thousands of people killed, it's much more difficult to bring back Syria together. For the first time in years, there is a little hope because now. I mean, I was with Kofi Annan in 2012 when he was trying to deal with the Syrian crisis. And at the time, the United States and Russia were speaking past each other. Iran and Saudi Arabia were not even in the room. Now Iran and Saudi Arabia are in the room, and there is a serious discussion between Russia and the United States. And Russia has acquired real leverage on the Syrian government. So that's what gives some hope. At the same time, I don't think that the negotiations in Geneva, Vienna will go very far between the Syrians so long as they are public negotiations, because after so much suffering, it's almost impossible to have a serious discussion under the public light. And so it's very important now to have quiet channels between the various Syrian parties to move forward. And it's not impossible. I think that it's we were all surprised that the cessation of hostilities held. It's very precarious. It could fall apart any time. But this is the first time it has happened in years. And so I think that will at some point require real engagement, including risk-taking by Europeans, because I don't think that if a cessation of hostilities is going to hold, it will hold just on its own accord. It will require some third party, and it may require deployment of international observers who themselves will need protection, a whole series of things that will mean that Europe will have to engage more directly than it has so far.
And more risk-taking by Europe is probably going to be something difficult to sell also in the European Union in the current situation. But Mr. Porth wanted to add something?
The only country who has an embassy there.
I think there's no question about that we all want peace in every place on this planet. And that should be a huge effort from all related parties to do so. But I would say it's very dangerous if we now go out and spread the message that all those people coming to us will go back, because this will be the best excuse for most other people to do nothing and wait. And for the whatever, if it takes 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, whatsoever, we need to act now. And there's no excuse, and we should not give any excuse to anybody in this game.
Yes, if I can intervene just with one thing.
I think we have the Arabic translation on the loudspeaker.
I just wanted to say that concerning Syria, that was precisely why we have still our embassy in Damascus, for the Americans and for the EU nations as well, because we had a feeling that there will be, at one point, we were hoping in peaceful solution of this conflict. And we were thinking that to have a postman at least would be useful, except for, of course, consular cases and things like that. So we stayed, and we are the only embassy, EU embassy and Western embassy in Damascus. So I wanted to say this small thing. And what concerns integration, we have experience with the Bosnians. There were many in our country, and 90% of them came back. But we were not thinking they would come back. We tried to integrate them, and now they serve very well to our mutual contacts, and those who stayed enriched our country. So we have some point, but look, to show the public, look, it worked. And it worked with Muslims, and it worked fine.
But you really don't have a whole lot of examples in the Czech Republic, given the policy that your government has been following in the last months or so. Wouldn't you call for a change in the blocking of the Visegrad states, for example, in the relocation of refugees? Which, I mean, if it's working and you're successful with it, why not take more?
Well, I mean, we are waiting, and I think that we are waiting how it will work. But we have already offered some numbers, and I will not want to speak for the whole Visegrad, but we try to find always some position, and when we don't find it, we speak for each and every country, you know. But you know, to see that those countries as totally you know, not contributing to the solution because of this one particular problem or one particular different view would not be reasonable because Visegrad countries, for example, are those who give the most officers to Frontex and ESO to hotspots. So we are aware that we have to make the whole thing work. So this was now the most urgent need, to have people there to help there. So it's a little more complex than it is presented in the news.
We have a question over there, the gentleman, right, in the blue shirt.
Skandinani from GMF. Is it possible to deal with this influx of immigrants and to integrate immigrants on this scale without a major rethink of the Eurozone's economic policy? To put it bluntly, is a solution to the refugee crisis compatible with austerity?
Anyone you're addressing the question to?
All of the panel.
Wanted.
Probably you should. Germany should answer first.
No, wait. So we have Germany first, and then we have Bulgaria.
I really believe there is no other solution than to tackle it, and then we need to find the right policies and politics to do so. And what happened the last days, I think, is the first step into the right direction. We need to find a common vision and how to tackle it. But we cannot build a wall around Europe and think that we can find the solution this way, that we isolate ourselves. And this is why rather we offensively will find solutions which will be different solutions for different countries, because we are in different economic situations. And maybe the people we need in our labor market are very different than the ones that Portugal will need, or Bulgaria, or whatever country. So we need to find a common vision with flexible solutions for each of the European countries. But we need to find solutions.
Go ahead.
Listen, I do believe it's an extremely important question, because in a certain way you have three crises. You have the Eurozone, you have the refugee, and you have Ukraine and Russia. And in a certain way, for different countries, one of them is the shaping one. And when I say Germany, it was not simply a joke, because I can imagine that for Mr. Schäuble, the biggest problem with the refugees is not that they're coming, but basically this is going to be much more difficult to defend rigidity of the fiscal system. The problem is that they're going to be a trade-off, and this trade-off between these three crises, in my view, is going to remake Europe in a certain way. Till moment, we're just betting on rigidity. On all three, we're going to say, stay the course. Fiscal stability, stay. Yes, but you come with these anti-austerity governments from the south, and they're going to push for revision. The same is with the refugees. Stay with resettlement, and of course we're saying we're not so bad as you believe, and of course some of our Western colleagues are helping us, because it was not Central Europeans that invented this Denmark idea of taking the jewels from the people, so we can have competition in nastiness all over. My idea is that in a certain way it goes with a much more simple message. European Union, in the way we know it, is not going to be able to deal with these three crises at the same time. This is very much about the remaking of the European Union. And this is why just going crisis by crisis and believing that we should respond to each of them. For example, there was this idea, we need a common European response. Okay, Turkey and Germany, this was an interesting story exactly because we failed with the common European response. Germany take the initiative, got the leadership on this, and we managed to Europeanize it to the extent that now the relations with Turkey are there. But this is the reality. For the moment, we have been betting on rigidity. I'm very much afraid, unlike of the colleagues here, who are most of them experts on integration, I'm experts on disintegration. I know how things collapse. I was doing the collapse of the Soviet Union, I mean professionally, Yugoslavia, and I know that things collapse very easily. And I know that in these choices, betting on rigidity is wrong. You need flexibility. You have kind of a different room for maneuvering for individual countries. The time which is going to take to the Bulgarians to do with the refugee issue in general probably is going to be different than one which is going to be needed for I don't know whom. The Swedes. As a result of it, how to push much more flexibility in the system without reducing the system and destroying the system is what, in my view, is the major challenge. And this is why I do believe it's properly normal to see how the fiscal softening is possible and under what kind of conditions and how this is going to work.
Please go ahead. One question right here.
Thank you very much. My name is Zsuzsa Szelényi. I'm a member of parliament in Hungary. And my government, led by Viktor Orban, is running an anti-immigrant campaign on government money since August continually, which is very highly rewarding for him. He grew 8% of popularity in the last couple of months. And we also saw that in Slovakia, in Poland, the anti-immigrant propaganda campaign was very rewarding. In this panel and in this forum, we are discussing how European countries should change their mind and prepare for a new world with a different reality where the international environment is completely different, and then we have to adapt. While at the same time, in our countries, this negative spiral and closing down is a very strong reality. So I wonder, what do you think where can be a breakthrough in these societies where no one wants to discuss difficult international situations? No one wants to hear about foreigners, refugees, whoever they are. So I don't really see, and of course a reality speak does not really work in the political arena. So I'm very curious for your
path
answer.
forward. Anyone you would
Thank
like
you.
to answer in particular?
Well, obviously the Central Europeans would be welcomed. Thank you.
Krasnicka.
Okay, I'm not a member of parliament. I'm not a member of government. So, so it is difficult for me. I'm just a diplomat. But what I feel is that we can see, to some extent, more openly some trends which are in many countries all over Europe, but we can see them more openly in our countries. That is, when you speak about anti-migrant and so on. It is not so rewarding, though, as we have seen in Slovakia, because people can turn to totally extremist parties. So each and every country is different. It's not that Visegrad is a bloc and each and every country is like this. You can have something in Finland of different thing and so on.
What is your path forward?
Well, I have totally out of the box idea, but please take it as if someone would come from Mars and not from my own position. I believe that we should work on European integration, and all that we do not understand each other, even if we in fact are Europeans and EU citizens, and that we do not understand that we are. We have to travel outside Europe to understand that we are Europeans. It's also, to some extent, our fault. And we could see on the example of India or United States that people from outside integrate much easier there because they are able to be very diverse and still have this myth, positive myth, and build on this myth. And they are integrated through several things, not too many, which make them proud Americans or proud Indians. And but it was not for free. You have to educate people since very little months. You have to have the set of values and myths, positive myths, and put it. I don't know if our children in Europe know about the fact that they have blue flag with yellow stars and the president of European Union, but they know only that they have president of their own country, and they learn, I don't know when, that they have also another president. And before when we still teach them the 19th century nationalist trash, we will not come out of this. So as somebody what looks at European Union from outside of European Union, where I spent quite some time of my diplomatic life, I must say that I lack this EU integration and a little more of Europeanness in our education.
So integration, education, you said flexibility. Anything you would like to add?
Yes, I want. First of all, talking about Mars, I'm sure that it's basically a candidate country these days, but no, I want to make one point, because of course when we talk Central and Eastern Europe, these days you have this old Jewish joke that comes of a husband who sent a telegram to his wife, start worrying, full stop, details to follow. And obviously there is a political trend. But do you know what is important in politics? In politics works only what divides. Unfortunately, Central and Eastern Europe is so unified in its anti-refugee sentiment that it cannot work politically. What divides works in politics. And from this point of view, Hungarian case is very important. For Mr. Orban to stay in power, two things are important. One is probably anti-refugee rhetoric, but it's very important, EU funds. So you can basically try to destabilize the European Union, but not to the extent that it's not going to perform. And don't forget, Hungarian economy is one of the most open. 60% is coming from several German companies. So from this point of view, I don't believe that this type of a strong populism based simply on anti-refugee is going to work for too long, because everybody is on the train. And this is the Slovak example. In Slovakia, basically, Mr. Fico betted that if the government party is going to adopt this, he's going to get the majority. He adopted it, and it appeared because everybody was there. You have a competition, and the opposition is always going to outvote you in idiocy because they're not in office. So from this point of view, probably we're going to have a certain shift. You're already seeing this type of a much more pragmatism. This does not solve a much bigger problem to which you talk. I don't believe that we are going to see a much more cooperation on the level of policies, but what we are doing with societies which believes that they're a victim of globalization, which perceive that we should defend ourselves. And by the way, as a result of this crisis, the level of mistrust between EU member states is very high. And this is a reality which came of this crisis that should not be underestimated.
You wanted to say something. You wanted to add something, right?
I wanted to add one point. I think it's difficult enough to transform a society so that it sees diversity as a positive and not a threat. But I think the additional difficulty that we have now is the politics of fear generated by terrorism.
Yeah.
I've seen in the United States how the post-9/11 world was changed by 9/11 and by the reaction at the time of the Bush administration to 9/11. And I don't think you would have the Trump phenomenon if there was not, if there had not been terrorist actions. And I find it really depressing to see that in Europe the reaction to terrorist actions is very similar to the one that we saw in the United States, and that has been very destructive. The governments have to tell their people that, yes, they have to fight terrorism. Yes, they have to strengthen their intelligence capacities and a variety of things to stop terrorism. But to present it as the strategic threat is deeply wrong. It's a strategic threat only insofar as it divides our societies. As such, it's a horrible thing, but it's not a strategic threat. But if the public discourse is allowed to go that way, we're going to have more and more difficulties to have a rational approach to movements of population around the world.
And one more thing, just one sentence. The fate of Mrs. Merkel is going to be critical for this debate. If she survives politically, on the base of what she's doing, you can understand that basically taking a position which at a certain moment looks vulnerable can pay back. And I do believe this is why, in a certain way, her political fact, which is going to be decided by the German voters, not by us, is going to have the most important political impact on this crisis.
The impression we have often in the German media corps in Brussels is that Angela Merkel has already changed her position. She's just not saying it.
No, listen, this is not true. And I'm going to say, in a certain way, what it means change her position. First of all, the only way I was listening to people saying why she said this and that. Can you imagine that we start these negotiations with Turkey under the conditions that we didn't get anybody? How we can negotiate with anybody without basically having 1 million in Europe? So from this point of view, the very possibility of Europe to negotiate with other countries about what they're going to do is due to the fact that she created a certain type of a political crisis, making to the outside world important to understand what is happening to us. Because in the United States, it's very difficult to explain why the refugee crisis is so big. They said, come on, what are you talking about? It's less than 1% of the population of the European Union. This is jokes. So from this point of view, I do believe she's going to change her position. Probably she's going more pragmatic here and there. It's politics. What she didn't change is that we cannot simply close ourselves. She's not in the business of basically removing the Berlin Wall on other type of frontiers. If she survives, this is going to be a very strong message to everybody. And I do believe, for example, for countries like ours on the periphery, this is critically important because people don't realize to what extent German influence in places like Bulgaria or Serbia or Albania is very much based on her personal popularity and relations with certain political leaders. So you can end up with a situation which is, if there is going to be a post-Merkel European Union, it's going to be a totally different animal.
I think just one sentence. You can take the if away.
Yeah.
She will survive.
We've had a question for a long time up there. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanos Dokos from Eliamep, a think tank based in Athens. It was mentioned in this panel and the previous one that migration is here to stay. It's a long-term problem for Europe, well beyond the end of the Syrian crisis, whenever that may take place. And protection of external borders is part of the answer, but integration is perhaps as much, if not more important. Now, there was an almost jubilant mood in Germany and other places, and that began to change, I think, for three reasons. One was the actual numbers of people that kept coming in. The second was the terrorist attacks in Paris in November. And the third was the sexual attacks in Köln at the end of the year. And in both cases, these were not committed by newcomers, but by citizens of France and Belgium, but also people in Germany for some time. So the question is, what do we need to change in our integration policies? What have we been doing wrong?
Anyone in particular you'd like this to answer?
Well, Mr. Guehenno, but first, but anyone else?
Well, we've already heard remove red tape from Daimler. Anyone else who would like to add something here?
Well, it's clear that the second generation migrants from the Maghreb in France, their integration has been a massive failure. And I think that is linked to a variety of factors, to a stagnant economy for a number of years with little prospects. That's the macroeconomic that we were discussing earlier, and also structural reforms in France. That's one thing. Then there is the urban planning. There was a massive building boom with cities which are not cities in the suburbs of Paris and other big French cities. And clearly that is the worst way to integrate people. So it's a lot of a mix of broader policies and micro policies that can deal with the issue. I think it's quite doable. You see examples, including in France, of very successful integration, but clearly there is a fringe of the population that has not been integrated. Now there's a belated recognition that this needs to be taken seriously. It has to do also with the way France has to decentralize more, so that there is more initiative at the local level. So it's a variety of things. The lack of integration is always a symptom of a society that's not really working.
But if I may add, everybody is familiar with the problem of the Front National in France, which leads the conservatives and the socialists to always have to work together in the end, which they're not designed to do. And you're seeing similar phenomena in Germany, for example. Now, in order to have a grand coalition, that's already a pretty big deal. They're not supposed to, designed to have that. So you have this problem through many European countries, where in order to counter the right or the populist movements, you need to join big parties together, which in return reduces their base. How do you address that? Because it's obviously something that hinders integration.
Listen, there are two countries which are very interesting to observe. One is Spain. Huge number of migrants as a proportion, basically, of the population. Secondly, the country that went through a major terrorist attack. And now, if you go on the opinion polls, this is one of the most tolerant countries with such high level of youth unemployment. So obviously, from this point of view, it's not simply this and that. It's also constellations, how you're making this. And by the way, with a very strong protest vote, but of course, their protest vote was much more an economic issue than identity politics. By the way, Greece managed to integrate almost 1 million Albanians over 20 years. 25 years ago, nobody was going to believe it. Muslims, we're not famous in the Balkans, easily working with each other. So I'm saying this, it is the political process. I'm very much against the idea to reduce everything populist versus anti-populists. This is the best way to fuel this anti-protest vote. But at the same time, and this is why I do believe, and when I say Merkel phenomenon, we're not voting, so from this point of view, this is not an election campaign, but the worst what can happen is for people to believe that the position which we have now is indefensible politically, because this is what happened in Central Europe in the beginning of the refugees. You have a series of political leaders who look at the public opinion polls. They said, listen, it's either refugees or me. And on this choice, you know, it's very clear. I do believe now when it starts to be much more complicated, and your point about Germany is very important, but it could be also very positive. Germany used to have one major problem with Europe before. Your political system has nothing to do with ours. You were too normal. You were too good. No populist in the parliament. Media is still trusted. Nobody tried to basically hate the big business too much. So you didn't know how we live. So now you're welcome in the real world.
You're fine.
Well, I just would like to say that we shouldn't so easily bind terrorism and migration. That this would be a big mistake, and we would overlook the real threats which we might have. And that is the fact that, it's true that some part of societies were less integrated or more, but the people who made these attacks were not people from traditional Muslim families.
No.
Not traditional. Those were people who were like normal youth, and we can expect also people from non-Muslim origin to even convert to become supporters of Islamic State. And 20 years ago, they would be in Red Brigades.
Yeah.
This is simply a protest, and we have in Europe lost generation feeling in among some parts of young societies, and this is what we should address. So it is not only about some integrated people who came second generation. No, there is some signal. I can't tell you what exactly, but we should really concentrate on this. These are signals about a kind of problem with part of European youth. And so this is just my...
So we should transform the red in green. I mean, from the Red Army faction to the Green Party.
Some would argue that has happened in Baden-Württemberg. Anyway, we have one reply from Mr. Guehenno and then time for one more question.
I completely agree with that, and actually it's interesting to see how a significant percentage of foreign fighters in France are French Catholic who convert to Islam, because for them it is the equivalent, as you say, of the Red Brigade or the Baader-Meinhof of yesterday. And the problem of integration is the problem of integration of an unemployed youth, of which significant numbers are second-generation migrants, but also a number of young French people, de souche, as the French extreme right would say.
Our last question of the day.
Sonia Lead, Belgrade Fund for Political Excellence. Ivan Krastev mentioned the Roma, and I don't think we can should leave this room without mentioning the largest European minority that unfortunately Europe until now, the EU and those in the vicinity, have failed to integrate. The Roma are also the group of people who are very reluctantly recognized as victims of Holocaust. So, for example, Mr. Juncker has an envoy now for anti-Semitism, and it is being promised that in the next stage there will be also an envoy for anti-Ziganism. I am very worried, and I know I'm not alone, that in this topic that we are discussing now, the refugees in Europe, the Roma might become a collateral damage because they are hastily now being sent out of Germany and other countries, for example, back to West Balkan. I would like to hear Ivan's opinion about it. Are they going to be a collateral damage of a new process?
At least in my view, this is quite important, because this is the integration experience that most of the Central European societies, by the way, Czech Republic being one, Bulgaria being the other, Romania have in practice. And we failed to integrate. Some money was put, European Union was making priorities, we have decades of the Roma. It didn't work. You have not simply a high level of unemployed people, we have unemployable people. And when you basically see all these foreigners coming to your border, you said, oh, another Roma. And I do believe this is quite important, because here it's not so much the cultural issue. These people have been living in our countries forever. They speak the language, but you have the failure of the educational system, you have the weakness of the state institutions, and this is one of the interesting things that I do believe makes Eastern Europe different than Western Europe. In places like Germany or Sweden, even when people are critical, they basically trust their institutions that you can do it. Unfortunately, our idea is that we look at our institutions and we said, okay, probably it's not the problem of these people, but we cannot do it. Our institutions didn't show effectiveness for the last years that they can do things like this.
Okay, well, that wraps it up. Thank you very much for coming, for the discussion. Thank you very much for being here as well. I think it's time for lunch now. Thank you.